Welcome to the Justin Johnston Show. I'm Justin Johnston, and I am happy to be here with you today. We've actually been looking at a lot of strategic ways to try to enhance what we're doing here. And every time I learn something from that standpoint, I'm like, hey, this is something I've got to share, and it's very interesting. I've got, in fact, I've seen this report before. I got it from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, and there was some research done. Let's see, Dylan Miner and Michael Meyer. They did a research. It was actually very comprehensive. It made a lot of sense. It's basically they did more than 58,000 hours of surveillance, so to speak. They had did it with 11 tech firms and 2,000 workers that they followed. And what it was is who we are around in the workforce and who we sit next to is very important. Now, we've known that since kindergarten, first grade, right? If I was sat next to a really pretty girl or one of my hoodlum friends, I would be kind of more of a hoodlum, and I maybe even impacted that. We're talking about work, we're talking about performance here. It's called the 25-foot rule. So, very interesting information here that you can look. And the two measures that they used on this is speed and quality of work, and they gave workers a ranking. So, if you can imagine this, you've got an open floor plan, and in real estate, it's very important who you have. It is a sales business, and if you've got somebody that's in there every day and they're making their calls, and all the guys around them start making their calls. Really interesting stuff. So if you got 25 feet around what you would call either a high producer or a bad egg, somebody that's very toxic, if you're around the high producer, all the people that are around them, and this is what they were able to study, is they had performance measures already with these employees that they were following. And they went in, they tracked what their performance was, and then they said, okay, then they just had a map, and they were because they ended up moving some of these employees around. If the average employee was sitting next to a star or high performer within 25 feet, their productivity went up 15%. So just in dollar amount, you can say this, if let's say you're making $100,000, you're going to be making $115,000 by way of financial benefits that would come from that. But also there's all sorts of you're happy to go into work, you're excited to go into work, you're doing a great job. Here's a very interesting thing that came out of that as well. If you are the high performer, a lot of people have said, well, geez, you know what? We put this high performer out there. They're out in the middle of the floor. We're trying to get as many people positioned around them. And eventually this is going to take a toll. It's going to be just a total drain on this high performer. And what they found is that was not necessarily the case, that there was this synergy that happened, and it didn't take away from the high performer. Now, so a 15% increase. If you were next to a bad egg, a toxic person, and if you worked in any company long enough, you know that there's always some people that are brought in. Sometimes they're considered a high-performing person, and then something maybe happened, and they become toxic. They're a bad egg. They just eat and cancer everybody around them. The people that were sitting within 25 feet of this toxic person didn't have a snapback of 15% loss in production. It actually was more than that. In fact, in some cases, it would deplete an entire department and wreak havoc, and they had to, either fire, and that's what it came down to, is something that they either had to fully discipline or fire. So they try to get the worst toxic person on the floor that they're working around. They found out it was a 30% deduction, right? So what you have, of course, you say double that, so 30% below, you're talking 45% swing in production And what happens is some of the people can be part of that high production. They learn how to do it better, and then they can go position them maybe 25 or 30 feet away, and you start to get this synergy of a floor that can actually be very productive. And everybody, and it just happens, right? So if you've got average employees sitting around the high production individuals, happier at work, higher production, greater profits. Now, I just want to point out a couple things. It's very interesting because it's like, okay, well, we waited too long. We before we fired so and so. Bill's over there, and Bill's like, hey, we finally got rid of Bill. We should have fired him a month ago. Everybody's kind of down. What they found is that once you got rid of that bad egg, then the rest of the employees actually it didn't have a long residual effect both ways. So if you got the high producer and he got promoted or he took another job and he moved out, it didn't last either, right? You still had to have somebody that was doing that high production. So that's a downside that way. But then the flip is you don't destroy your entire sales force. And of course, it's more than just sales, but that's the way I think of it. And I would say any sales, not just real estate, any sales floor that has a bad egg and high producer, what you're trying to achieve, nobody wants to have the bad egg and the negative. Like I said, that could happen over time to where they get to the point maybe they're just so jaded and negative. But it's better just to fire them and get rid of them as fast as you can because, or maybe they work better with somebody else, right? So there's lots of ways you can do this. But what they found is they had this seating chart out on the floor, and they could actually move people in and out of it to where they could gauge their production. And it was a very successful study and one that that I just read. It was like in the last month or two that it was published there in the Kellogg School of Management. There is spillover, right? There's always spillover. You think about a 25-foot radius. Oh, what do they call that? Spatial planning. That instead of, a lot of times when production goes up or down or they think that something's happening, and I'm susceptible to this as well, it's like, hey, things are going off. Let's get everybody into training better. Let's get into this new training module or program or create some type of new incentive program that we can write up and stuff. And at the end of the day, what they found was the most cheap and affordable and best way to do it is just juggle this seating chart, right? And so you have this open spatial. So, some companies were actually making it so that once the high producing individual had sat down, there was no assigned seating, but wherever they sat, they had people that were able to. Okay, so these 5 people, wherever he sits, you can sit around him on the next 5 desks or something like that. And so they juggled that. They played with it. They actually modified entire floor plans to where there was assigned seating, there wasn't assigned seating, and there's a lot of people that are playing with this with the new office situation, people working from home. But when you get this cohesive group together, I don't think anybody can doubt that if you can get that type of a group together, people want to come into work. And so it's not a ploy to get people into the office to work, but sometimes, like I said, a sales floor and high producers need that camaraderie and lift, and you can get that. But very, very interesting because it was 58,000 hours, 2,000 workers, 11 companies. They were tech companies, but hey, there's I think tech companies are a pretty good cross reference for the rest of the market because you do have sales and you have engineers and that type of thing where production is very important. And so I think it was a good study and a lot came out of it. And I just want to make sure that everybody else was aware of this because I think that it's really important to think of not what architects are trying to do. They're simple solutions that make sense. Everybody's got them. We know what it is. It's like if you had a room full of your kids playing and younger kids, it's like, hey, you got to separate these two and they can do well. I mean, for me, my seating arrangements when I was in school was as close to the door and around the fewest amount of people. I just had a attention deficit disorder, attention ADHD, and I was bouncing off the walls always, and I just couldn't focus. But if I, in fact, in my third grade, I had a great teacher. He let me leave, go out, get a drink if I wanted to, even if I did it 10 times in a day. I didn't want to abuse it because I'd never been given that option before. So, a couple little things like that, seating arrangements, I did really well. And then sometimes we change up the seating, and somebody was next to me. I guess I could have been a high producer or the bad egg in some ways in the classroom setting. And so I just wanted to point this out. This is a very fast and easy way to remedy some of these problems without coming up with a whole new training or package or incentive package for the people to say, hey, we're missing our mark. No, first and foremost, let's take a look at your floor plan, see what you got going, see if you can take the high performers and keep them. You want to keep them, right? Because then everybody else is producing at a level. I would even say in a sales environment, it could be much more than 15%. But maybe that is the best average. Maybe you can only get a group of people to come up 15%. But any increase of 15, that's not small, right? I mean, we're talking about a significant amount, and if it even did a little bit more with some people, and you could create a new superstar. Wonderful bits of information. So maybe go ahead and check that out. Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern. They have some great articles that come out from time to time dealing with these types of things. One article that I do want to talk about in the future, maybe if we have time, is about AI. And interestingly enough, how AI could actually help with this design and layout, because you can track all the information a little bit easier. But the field that is being most concerned about being replaced, which is interesting, at least in these last couple articles I've written or that I've read, are those in the medical field. It can pull from such a huge database. You can go in, you can get diagnostics done, you can have blood drawn, you can interact with a computer at home, or when you go in for sickness, and it can take all of the symptoms that you have and give you maybe the perfect remedy of it, whereas your doctor is not in a position to maybe do all that. Maybe they're dealing with the front end stuff, but what does that mean? I think what we're going to see is some highly specialized medical people that are seeing a lot more patients, but seeing as they're administering medications and analysis of the prescription that's coming from AI. But very interesting. We'll talk about that. I know it's all AI is something that's very interesting. So I do appreciate anything that you can give us, from feedback to maybe things that we're should be talking about, you think that would be applicable. I'm trying to not just talk about commercial real estate, but talk about business. And of course, my passion is to try to drive manufacturing here in the United States, in the state of Utah. We've had some great wins. Texas Instrument buying out the IM Flash Micron plant. I've talked about that before, but there's some huge benefits coming with that. And of course, then that just brings additional jobs. Duncan restoring these jets from all around the world, customizing them down off Provo Airport. And I've got a passion. I'm very excited to learn, and we'll discuss this more as well. But having an inland port hub in Spanish Fork around the airport there, that's become more of a private airport and cargo related airport. They're not trying to go after commercial contracts for flights, but to have this be keep trucks off the road the best that we can. They've got an overall plan and design that's going to come with. We'll talk about that in future ones. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and of course give us some feedback and tell your friends about it. And hey, have a great week. Thank you.